when it comes down to kind of like the early church seeing that Peter was the one kind of specifically as kind of like the leader, and then you have the 12 apostles, and then you see this in Acts where they realized that there was too much to do, and so they decided they wanted to bring about servants or someone to help serve, and so they brought about deacons, and so they brought deacons within, and they established them as the next part of the another part of this hierarchy. And I think the priesthood came later. There's
in the New Testament, they start talking about a council of elders.
Okay.
Presbyteroi, depending on how you pronounce the Greek. And so presbyters is the English word that comes from it, and that the idea of an apostle or leader of the church with a group of elders being sort of the foundation stone of the church, and like Corey said, where there's too much ministry for one person to do it alone, so they start appointing co-workers. And those elders, the word is presbyteroi, and so that it translates through the tortuous history of language into priest in English, more or less. But it's not quite as clear in the New Testament, like who's a bishop, who's an overseer, an episcopoi, and who's part of this presbyteroi. They're kind of combined. But the very early church sort of separates it out into this three-tier segmentation. And there are places where you can see it in the letters of Paul, but in the New Testament, the terminology isn't super clear. Like, there's actually a decent argument that you can make in the Acts of the Apostles that these men that were ordained deacons functioned as what we would now call priests. They're called deacons in the New Testament, but there weren't the harder dividing lines that there were later. With good reasons. That a lot of it starts to come into being as practice, and praxis just starts saying, well, if you're going to have a priest, he needs to be educated. He needs to know what he's doing, because you can get things wrong. And some of those kind of things. So they do come about in the New Testament, but it is, Corey's right, that it's not until in about the 30 or 40 years after, between the latest books of the New Testament and the earliest generation of Christian writings that we have. Depends on how you date things a little bit, but there seems to be this little bit of development where they segment it out into the three tiers. Priest, or bishop, priest, deacon, lay faithful. Mm-hmm. And so you have those three tiers of holy orders and then the laity. That becomes super clear in Ignatius of Antioch, who's one of the early saints, and my confirmation saint. We celebrate him in 2 days. Oh. You pick him for your confirmation saint, he's a cool guy. He's almost always shown being eaten by lions, because that's how he died. So the pictures of him look rather funny. I thought about bringing my icon of him tonight, because he's like walking around with these lions hanging off of him and like fighting him. And that's just classical iconography. If you see a man being eaten by lions, it's Ignatius of Antioch.
I don't think I ever saw that. Probably knew that at some point, but I forgot about that. But good. Well, thanks. So, like what I was trying, my hope is that I was able to at least establish this idea that the church it's much bigger than what we know, what we might think it might be. Even as I was just kind of studying for this or setting this up and getting this ready, just the idea of I was like, oh, there's a lot more depth than I even remember when I was studying seminary to it. When I was in seminary for it, and it was just it brings about such a beauty of this idea that it's like we're all, once we said what we're saying yes to is something that's already been going for a long time. It's been established. Has the church been wrong. It's like, yes, things have been going wrong. It has been bad at some points, but ultimately it's the coolest, the best part about it, and why I think even like the fact that it would go wrong is the fact that like, it's like, because it went wrong and then it still was corrected and it never like actually just completely dismantled. It continued moving forward. It's always moving forward. It's, when Christ did say that even the gates of the netherworld won't prevail against it, like we've seen that in time to time again throughout church history. That's something that, knowing church history and like the fact that we had two popes who excommunicated each other and that like all these things were happening is just actually insane that we're still sitting in the same church. That it's still a thing. So I think that's even a greater, just a greater testament to that the Holy Spirit is alive and well within the church. And that is all that I have for the evening. So if you have got something else, or no?